Hello, everyone, and welcome back for more of Hope 2020. Before we jump in the next session, we want to give an old school slow clap to all the attendees, presenters, and volunteers whose commitment to hope and to our community have made this event possible in these trying times. So next up are Phillip Scroggins and Marjorie George. Marjorie and Phillip are retired New York City educators and have traveled together to every continent over the past 20 years, mostly using miles. Their talk today is titled A Hacker's Toolkit for Global Travel, or How to Travel Anywhere on Airline Miles. And it's about how traveling the world can be done with little or no money. Always good to know. We'll have a QA session with Phillip and Marjorie after the talk, so be sure to submit your questions via the Matrix chat window, and we'll gather them and ask them directly. Now, over to you, Marjorie and Phillip. Take it away.
Hi. We'll be with you in a second as soon as I get this set up and running. There we go.
Hi.
Okay. Hi, I'm Phil Scroggins.
Hi, I'm Marjorie George.
And this is A Hacker's Toolkit for Global Travel, or How to Travel Anywhere on Airline Miles.
We're two retired New York City educators who decided that we would like to spend our retirement traveling as much as possible. The problem is, how do you do that on a pension?
I've invested a lot of time, effort, and money in learning how to beat the airlines at their own game. It's become my all-consuming hobby, and whenever anyone asks me what I do in retirement, I tell them I spend my time figuring out ways to beat the man. We've traveled all over the world this way. Just prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, we were in Australia and New Zealand for a month, and it only cost me about $300 to fly there round trip in business class.
I paid a little bit more, about $800, because I didn't have this amount of miles that Phil did. But I still flew in business class on one of the best airlines in the world for $800. That same flight would have cost over $1,500 in economy.
For each way. Okay, take a minute to read the disclaimer. Okay, that's enough.
No one, not even the airlines, know what the world, the post-COVID travel world will look like. Nor do we know when normal or something close to normal travel will resume. Until the plague hit, had it been the practice of airlines to maximize profit by jamming as many people onto a plane as possible. Obviously, that is probably not going to work in the future. That meant, but jamming as many people as possible on a plane meant that there were empty seats, and that was relatively easy to fly on miles. This is probably not going to be the case moving forward, because there will be fewer airlines and fewer seats. But we still believe that you will be able to get seats if you're diligent on miles.
Second, you can't fly for no money. Yes, I'm aware that's a double negative. Anyone who tells you that you can fly for no money is either a crook or they're lying to you. It will always cost you something in terms of at least taxes and airline fees, but not nearly as much as it would if you paid for it. Because think about it, if you paid for it, you'd still have to pay those taxes and fees. If you're careful, even the taxes and fees can be reduced. When you try to research the history and origins of frequent flyer programs, you get a lot of conflicting stories and various airlines all trying to claim credit for something that's obviously been a real cash cow for them. No matter who you credit it to, this much is certain. Airlines began tracking their passengers' travel in the 1950s and gave plaques and little rewards to their most frequent flyers. In 1981, American Airlines launched the Advantage frequent flyer program and United Airlines launched the Mileage Plus program almost simultaneously. Later that year, Delta Airlines created their own Sky Miles program.
By 1997, every major airline had a frequent flyer program offering free flights after a certain number of flights or miles flown. To further entice customers, U.S. Airlines formed alliances with foreign carriers to allow the use of their frequent flyer miles for overseas travel.
Somehow, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Somehow, no one outside of the airline industry knows how airlines actually make money trading miles between each other. They consider it a trade secret. And in the event, I look at it like BF Skinner would. I don't really need to know what goes on inside the box as long as I know what input I need to get the desired output. In this case, the desired output is a reduced, low cost business class ticket.
To carry this even further, the major airlines formed strategic alliances between each other to keep the trading of miles and available seats between them so they don't lose them to other airlines with whom they're not partnered, and to reduce the areas in which they have to compete for business, sort of like the spheres of influence the European powers formed in the 1800s. This means that buying a ticket from New York to Moscow on Delta will probably land you on Aeroflot, or an All Nippon Airways ticket could put you on United. True story. I did a search for New York to Singapore the other day, and the Singapore Airlines search routed me through Switzerland on Swiss. I've heard that some people suggest that this is somehow cheating the airlines and stealing from them. Nonsense. Despite the poverty that the airlines claim, there have been times in recent history where, while the rest of the airline was running at a deficit, the only department actually making money was the frequent flyer miles. It's my guess that that's the only thing keeping them afloat right now.
There are a variety of ways to collect frequent flyer miles. Flying is how most people think you collect frequent flyer miles. This is how the airlines would love you to do it, because then you just be flying back and forth and giving them more and more money. It is how they make the most money, but it's how you lose the most money.
Quick story. I had been saving miles for years for a trip to the Far East, and I was doing it on United. And then I noticed that my miles were expiring. So what did I do? I planned a trip to Chicago. What did I do? I went to Chicago, I had lunch, I turned around, I came back. Why? Because a $350 airline ticket was cheaper than losing thousands of miles that I had accumulated over the years. Turns out that was the wrong thing to do, because United still found a way to take away those miles.
Which is also another caveat, is use your miles as soon as possible. Several airlines will give you additional miles if you buy an economy class and later upgrade to business or first class. That too is expensive and, generally speaking, not the way to go.
There are different ways that you can do this. You can buy a ticket but in economy, and then ask them for an upgrade, which sometimes they'll do for free, but it's not likely. You can wait till you get to the gate, ask for an upgrade. Sometimes they'll do it, but it's not likely. Or you can ask when you get on the plane, which is really not likely. Now, keep in mind that you can only upgrade to the next class, and you can't do it from the cheapest ticket. So you cannot buy basic economy and think you're going to get into first class. Ain't happening. You can't upgrade a basic economy ticket at all. So never buy basic economy.
You could just buy the miles. Now, this is the method we use most often, as crazy as it sounds. Most of my miles were obtained through Avianca Airline Life Miles program. I have actually never flown on Avianca, not one time. But I have used their frequent flyer program to buy miles several times. The last time, for example, I bought Avianca miles when they had 150% sale on miles. So what does that mean? That means that I bought 25,000 miles at 3.6 cents per mile, I'm sorry, which turned out to be about $900. But because they were running a sale, they actually gave me 50,000 additional miles, bringing the total up to 75,000 miles at which I purchased for $900. Now, what's significant about that? You need currently 80,000 miles for a one-way business class ticket, which is what I needed. So therefore, I I bought $75,000 miles for approximately $900, which was most of the way towards a business class ticket. I'll tell you later how I made up the other 5,000 miles. But a one-way business class ticket would have cost on Oceania would have cost about $3,000. Mind you, $900 brought me 75,000 miles. The savings there is obvious.
Okay, you're looking at a chart now that's taken from ITA software. ITA software is your best friend when it comes to finding out airline prices. ITA is owned by Google, and Google hates it when you use ITA. ITA is used to amass the data that they use for Google Flight, I think it's called. And when you go to Google Flight, they want to sell you the ticket, and they don't tell you all the fees, and they don't tell you everything that's related to it. All of that data is in ITA software. So what you do is you look up where you want to go, and ITA software will tell you how much the fares are on every airline. And this way you'll know exactly what it will cost you. In this example that you're looking at, we were flying New York to Sydney in business class because we're taking a cruise ship back, but that's another story. Oops. It would cost anywhere between $34.38 and $9,300 to fly one way. $3,900 to fly one way. I would only, if you look at this list and you look at what the airlines are, I would only fly Oceania on this list because the service is much better than the others, and the price difference really isn't that great. There are many different plans which allow you to buy miles, although Marriott Bonvoy looks to be the cheapest. If you look at my research, they have many restrictions, such as you can only buy a maximum of 50,000 points at a time. Ooh, what happened?
Go back.
We will have to go back.
Okay, here we are.
You can only buy a maximum of 50,000 points at a time, and those points transfer to airlines at a rate of 3 points per mile, which means that you need 3 times as many points as miles that you need. If you transfer them to Airline or Life Miles, however, you can combine American Express miles to make up the difference. Once I combined miles from American Express, Black Card, and SPG to get enough points to fly for only the taxes. Now, my mom always told me not to shop at Macy's on any other day besides Wednesday. Why? Because they always have a sale on Wednesdays. I'm sure you've noticed that by now. It's the same with miles. Always buy miles when there's a sale, which happen at least once or twice a year. Avianca, for example, seems to have Life Miles sales at least 2 or 3 times a year. Their latest sale, which gave you a 150% bonus for every mile purchased, just ended. Aeroplan and Bonvoy, however, both have sales now. And if you buy 50,000 Bonvoy points, you get a total of another 30,000 points for a total of 80,000 points, which translates to about 27,000 actual miles. If you need more proof that miles trading business is lucrative for the airlines, look no further than Marriott Bonvoy. Due to COVID-19, nobody's staying at their hotels and resorts worldwide except those who are quarantined or bubbled. So this is a way of making at least some money. Look out for future sales as the crisis continues.
Okay, so in this example of an economy fare, it is possible to buy a ticket with cash for less than getting it with miles, but do you really want to change flights in Qatar to go to Australia? Sometimes utility and value have to be the deciding factors on how to purchase a ticket. We're not necessarily saying that our method is the cheapest, but consider this. The two cheapest fares require two layovers with a total of 41 hours. Is saving $98 really worth an extra 13 hours in travel time? I think not.
This is why you have to comparison shop. Yes, you can fly for less than the cheapest miles price, even on sale. But no matter how you go, the cheapest fares are going to yield a miserable experience one way or the other. I don't know if it's apparent, but we are of a certain age. And as such, it's very difficult for us to sit cramped for 9 hours in an economy seat anymore. When we get up, our backs hurt, our legs hurt, everything hurts. And it's a terrible way to start a vacation. I flew to the UK with a friend on Virgin Atlantic, and he insisted that we go in economy because it was cheaper. We only saved about $200 over using miles in business class, and I had an uncomfortable flight. When I pointed this out to him, my friend said, "But hey, we saved $200. So my friend was penny wise and pound foolish.
Exactly. So if you want to start off your vacation on a good note, feeling rested and comfortable, and maybe even a little bit pampered, consider using miles to go in business class. As everyone knows, you can also accrue miles by using a credit card that gives them as a perk. Of course, there is a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this. Consider the purchases that you make every day: groceries, gas, cosmetics, I don't know,
Dry cleaning.
whatever. How many miles are you losing by not charging them to a credit card that gives you miles for purchases? Remember that I needed to make up that 5,000 miles that I needed to get a business class ticket? Well, everyday purchases is how I made up that 5,000 miles.
Everyday purchases can actually add up to quite a few miles, and when they're added to other methods such as buying miles and upgrading, you can save quite a bit. I needed 80,000 miles for a round-trip flight to Europe when I went for the World War I commemoration a couple of years back. So I transferred 20,000 from my American Express account and 10,000 from my Marriott Bonvoy account. This way I only had to buy 50,000 points, which was the sweet spot for miles purchased on Airline at the time. The reason I say it's the sweet spot is because it gets to a certain level and then the number of points that you can buy the bonus declines because they don't want you doing exactly what I did. So, but by transferring some 30,000 in, I could buy less, and therefore my I spent less on my ticket. This way, I only had to buy 50,000 points, which was that sweet spot for miles purchased on Airline at the time.
I earned quite a few miles on what I call my shoe card. And when I had pets, the vet racked up quite a even more points. So again, just think about your everyday purchases and how you can make that work for you. Another thing is that no one ever reads the stuff that comes in with your credit card statements or the emails they get, you know, just put it in your junk mail folder. But in those emails or inserts in your credit card statements, there are often ways to get extra miles. They often run promotions, like, for example, recently several companies were running promotions for double points or triple points or whatever for purchases made at grocery stores.
Right now, for example, American Express Gold Card is a deal where they give you 4 times points for money spent in the supermarket. That means, for example, if I spend $100 on groceries, I get 400 points, which can be exchanged for 400 airline miles. $100 a week equals 5,200 points a year, for which American Express will give me 4 times points, or 28,000 points, or 20,800 points. Sorry. For doing absolutely nothing but buying the same groceries that I would have bought anyway. Some people might say to you, yeah, but there are fees on those cards and they're expensive. Guess what? If you have those cards and you pay the fees, you almost always get enough utility out of it to make up what you paid. So it winds up costing you nothing.
There are many caveats to collecting miles with purchases, though, and if you're not careful, not only will the ticket cost you more in the end, but you'll wind up owing a lot of interest. So be smart and follow these really simple rules. Rule number one is, as we said before, miles have an expiration date. So don't hold on to your miles thinking, well, I'm going to use them 5 years. Use them as soon as possible. Airlines devalue them quite frequently. They put an expiration date. They can change the terms with very little notice. So if you bank them, you could just wind up losing them or wind up with worthless miles. This probably sounds obvious, but don't buy anything you weren't going to buy anyway. Yes, you were going to buy gas. Yes, you were going to buy groceries. Yes, you're going to take Fido to the vet. But don't say, well, yeah, I think I need living room furniture. I'll do it so I can get miles. No, we're not saying that. We're not encouraging people to go into debt to get miles for airline tickets.
Just buy things you would have bought anyway. Think about that $5 cup of Starbucks coffee every morning. You're spending the $5 anyway. Instead of giving Starbucks $5 in cash, put it on your credit card. Like, there are some things, of course, I'm sure you don't want to show up on your credit card, but coffee, you're afraid the man will find out you drink coffee? Big deal.
The next obvious point, pay off the card as soon as possible. As soon as possible, ideally, is immediately. Go home and go online to pay for what you had just bought. Otherwise, as one financial expert put it, you will be paying for that cup of coffee twice.
There's a methodology to buying miles. Make sure the destination and dates are available. Use ITA software or Skyscanner to make sure you're getting a good deal. You don't want to spend more in miles than you would have paid if you paid cash. Compare the prices and make sure you're getting a good deal, and then buy the miles and use them right away. Seats sell out fast. This is especially a problem with Life Miles because they often sell out almost a year ahead of time. One example, I said to Marjorie, we have to buy these tickets. She said, that trip's not for a year. I said, that's right, but the miles go on sale 364 days before the flight. So we have to buy them now. Now, Marjorie bought the course because she thought it was silly, but we bought them. I went back 363 days later, and guess what? 363 days before the flight, and guess what? They were all gone.
So seats sell out very, very quickly because they're only releasing a certain amount of seats that you can purchase with miles. So they go really, really fast. So
there have actually been times when we bought one seat from Avianca and one seat from Airline, because there was only one seat available in each plan.
Yeah. So you really need to solidify your travel plans. Some credit cards give you cash back. I won't name them a name, but you know some of them start with the D and end with the R. And instead of giving you frequent flyer miles, they give you cash back. Well, this is a trap. Airline miles, frequent flyer miles, for the reasons that we have been telling you this whole time, are worth a lot more than a small percentage of what you spend. That $3, I don't know what you're going to do with the $3 cash back, but I do know what you can do with those airline with 30,000 frequent flyer miles. So don't do it. Get a card that's going to give you the miles. Miles are much more valuable than the cash back. They're going to make money on the interest anyway. So get the airline, the frequent flyer miles.
Just before we recorded this talk, I went online and I bought something from a certain online company that begins with an A and ends with an N and sells everything. This company offered to give me the product that I wanted to buy, which was only $20, by the way, for 19,000 American Express miles. I thought to myself, they gotta be kidding.
Much more valuable using them to fly.
Check every frequent flyer program and join all of them, and check them for specials and sales. Most of them are free, and you don't have to fly the airlines to use your miles on them. Alitalia's Mille Miglia is the only exception that I know of. And in their case, what you have to do is you have to have flown Mille Miglia once before they'll let you use miles that you bought. And you can only use 75% of the miles that you need to fly on. So that means that you have to fly Mille Miglia at least a couple of times to be able to fly Mille Miglia. So stay off Mille Miglia. Stay off Alitalia. Sometimes you can double dip and get miles for both your credit card company and from the airline. So if that's why you're reading the things that come with your credit cards.
Okay.
Now, here are just some of the programs that I'm a member of. These aren't even all of them. These are just the ones that I use most frequently. Don't think that a frequent flyer miles are only for an overseas flight. Although I don't think you can do it anymore. I once used Delta miles on a Virgin Atlantic site to purchase a round trip from LaGuardia to Boston on Delta. So they can be used domestically, and sometimes if you buy them from a European site or an Asian site, it will actually cost you less than if you bought them from the actual domestic site that you would have been buying them on. And they're going to put you on the same plane. For another example, and although this is an overseas example, if you want to go on Qantas, it's almost impossible to buy frequent flyer miles and use them on Qantas because they just don't have the seats available. But you can buy Delta miles, and guess what? When you go to the airport, they put you on a Qantas plane. So you wind up still on Qantas. In some circumstances, there will just be no frequent flyer seats available. This is because each airline in the alliance is allotted a certain number of seats, and to sell them for you, they have to get them from another airline. In one case, Life Miles only showed 2 seats available in business class on a LOT Polish Airlines flight to Warsaw. But when we got on the plane, we were the only 2 people in business class.
So our final destination was not Warsaw, but we were changing planes, and that was our route. And so I think that in light of the current situation, to just add a little side story here about what we're going to call traveling while Black. So we do a lot of traveling in business class this way because, as we said, we're older. You know, we don't want to sit in economy for a long period of time. But we are, we're retired, retired educators. So we were on a business, getting on this flight, and they called for business class, and we went up, and the flight attendant didn't look at our boarding
She means
class.
the gate agent.
The gate, yes, I'm sorry. The gate agent didn't look at our boarding passes, but decided that we did not belong in the business class line. That this line is for business class. So we tried to explain to her that we did actually have business class seats, but she insisted that this line was for business class. After some convincing, she actually did look at the boarding passes, and we did get in the flight. But I'm going to say that is not necessarily the first time that had happened.
It's happened on Virgin. It's happened on LOT. It's happened on Air France.
So
it happens a lot. Singapore, they looked at our tickets, then looked at us, then looked at our tickets, and
we did get on the flight.
It didn't seem to make sense to her, but she didn't give us any trouble, unlike the European airlines. Hidden routes are sometimes an option as well. Think outside the box and use ITA software or Skyscanner to find hidden combinations that might work. Now, I'm not telling you that you should buy a ticket to a particular destination if you're not going to that destination. For example, there are some people who might look at a flight between New York and Houston and realize that it's actually cheaper to fly from New York to Las Vegas with a stop in Houston for changing flights. They get off the flight in Houston, they throw away the part from Houston to Las Vegas, and then they go on their vacation. This is illegal. They can ban you for life from that airline if you do that. Lufthansa, no matter how long it was between flights, when you try to fly them again, they have it in their computer that you did that, and they will charge you the difference between the flight you did take and the flight you were going to take, plus the price of your new airline ticket that you're buying. So don't do that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that sometimes there are what they call hidden destinations in between flights that you might want to take. And if you say to a travel agent, I want to buy this seat on this flight, or if you have the flight code for a particular flight, they will sell you that flight, and it might be cheaper. For example, if you're flying from New York to LA with a stop in Houston, but you really want to go to Houston, you say to them, I'm going from New York to Houston. This flight has a stop off in Houston. They will sell you that ticket, and that might actually be cheaper than flying to Houston on a listed flight. Now, you might also think of traditional political allies where people might have immigrated. If there's a lot of immigration back and forth, there's also a lot of travel back and forth between those places. People go back home to visit their relatives and whatever, and as such, they stop off in these places. Germany and Turkey, for example, are an example of that. Also, think about nearby cities. Fly to Frankfurt if you're going to Berlin. Why? Because there may be many more seats available to Frankfurt, and a plane between the two cities is fast and cheap, only $62. If you take the train, it's $110. Another thing you might do is fly during off periods of time. A good example of this. A lot of people fly to London the first time they go to Europe because they're afraid because they don't speak the language or whatever. Don't worry about it. They all speak English. Fly instead to Brussels. Don't fly to London. If you fly to Brussels and you fly on a Saturday, it's going to be much cheaper than if you fly to Brussels or London during the week. Here's why. Brussels is the headquarters for NATO. Brussels is the headquarters for the International Court. Brussels is the headquarters for the European Union. So because of that, it's Washington, D.C. on steroids. There's all these people coming back and forth and staying there, and they're filling all these very expensive, very nice hotels. However, they all go home on Friday. When they go home, those hotels are empty. They're losing money. So the planes are also empty. So what you do is you buy a ticket that flies on the weekend, like Saturday or Sunday, and guess what? The prices are going to be much lower than they would be if you bought them during the week. So that's an example. Once you get to Brussels, you can take a train from there to anywhere in Europe, or you can fly on one of the cheap airlines like EasyJet.
Or you might actually consider spending some time in Brussels. But you get the idea.
Another idea. If you're planning a trip with 2 or 3 countries, price out a round-the-world ticket. An round-the-world or an RTW ticket can actually sometimes be cheaper than flying to 2 or 3 destinations on a point-to-point ticket, on 2 or 3 point-to-point tickets. For example, if you fly New York to Paris, then Paris to Beijing, and from Beijing to Tokyo, and then back to JFK, that might actually be cheaper than a flight from New York to Beijing to Tokyo to JFK. It all depends on the number of locations, stops that you make, and the class of service and the availability of seats. So sometimes you can make out better with an RTW ticket, and because they'll throw in some other stops because they have to, because they can't give you a direct. Charter flights are sometimes an option as well. You have to figure the cost of the miles against the price of the flight, but you may get a better deal by just paying to go on the charter flight. Once we got a United flight from Shanghai to JFK very cheap, but after we got on the flight, we found out that it was the baby flight. It was a plane full of Chinese babies who had been recently adopted by Americans. I was a teacher for 30 years. I love children. Don't think I'm lying. I don't. But 18 hours of crying, screaming babies is a bit much. So, but it was a very cheap flight. So
I think that's when we decided to try to go business class.
Yeah, but if you're willing to put up with the discomfort, it's worth it. And it wasn't that bad because in the end, I wound up being seated next to the sky marshal. He was a really nice guy, and we wound up having a really nice conversation. A travel agent is also an option. Yes, there are still a few around. If you go to an ethnic neighborhood and go to a travel agent there, they'll know the cheapest flight to a particular destination because the locals travel back and forth to visit relatives and take money. If you're going to Jamaica, West Indies, for example, ask a travel agent in Jamaica, Queens. They'll put you on the cheapest American Airlines flight. If you're going to Asia, to um, China, Taipei, Taiwan, go to Chinatown, ask a travel agent there. They'll know the cheapest flight. If you're going to go for a certain thing, either don't go at festival time because that's when they're all flying. Planes will be full unless you can get on a charter, in which case then they'll be cheaper. Sometimes the cheapest flight can even be combined with a charter for even greater savings. Here are some of the sites that I found useful over the years for planning my travel. They're all reliable, trustworthy, and free. There are other sites that you can use that charge annual fees or whatever. I found that usually they're not worth it. These are the ones that are the best ones. I use the first 5 ones on the list all the time. Honorable mention is RomeToRio.com. Rome to Rio is really just my entertainment site because Rome to Rio will tell you how to get from anywhere to anywhere. If you want to know how to get from New York to London, they will give you every possible combination and every possible way that you can do it. Plane, train,
boat,
everything.
Ferry, name it.
So Rome to Rio is a very useful site. And I think that just about finishes us up. Let's go to the conclusion.
Yeah. So remember the 3 things we said, the 3 takeaways. Join every frequent flyer program you can. In the worst, the airlines have the best program, and you do not have to necessarily fly on that airline. Read your credit card statements, blogs, website, email to find out ways that you can collect extra miles and make sure you use them by those expiration dates and buy miles when they go on sale. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. So there's no way we can tell you everything that we learned about traveling on miles. We didn't discuss hotels or other modes of transportation, but you have our email addresses. Thank you for your time and attention. Stay safe, wear a mask, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Marjorie and Phillip. Those were some great tips and great stories. So, have you always been travelers, and how did you get started in travel hacking?
Well, what happened was one of my hobbies has always been trying to find ways to travel cheaply. And it just became more and more of an all consuming passion. I tell everyone, oh, my hobby's trying to beat the man. And I develop different strategies and I'm constantly doing it. It's like people call me and they'll say, what are you doing? I'm saying, oh, I'm looking at airline fares.
So, have you been traveling your whole lives, or was this a recent thing?
Well, I've known Marjorie since she was 17.
That's true. We met in college.
When she was when she was about 25, I said to her, "You ever been on a cruise?" And she said, "No, because it's something my family used to do every year without fail. It was our vacation. So Marjorie said, no. And I said, okay, let's take a cruise. And she said, well, I don't know. I might get sick. I said, don't worry, you won't get sick. So I took her on a cruise and she had a really great time. And it was a really short little cruise around Florida for and down to the Caribbean for like 3 days. And then when we got off the ship, I said, did you have a good time? She said, yeah. I said, good, because next year we're going to Russia.
Yes. It was maybe supported by the hurricane. So that made us miss a port, but it was still good. And the next year we went to Europe, in which case we encountered a really rough sea at the North Sea, and the waiter was handing out seasickness pills at the dinner table. But despite those first two experiences, I still went on with cruising because I really like it.
A lot of people say, I'm going to save my money and go when I retire. And I say to them, that is the worst thing you can do. Because as you get older, you get weaker, you get sicker, you get more responsibilities. And if you wait until you're old and sick and weak, you're not going to have a good time anyway. Go now, go while you can, because you don't know, the place that you want to go to may not be there next year.
Yes, political situations change as you're probably saving a question for that. So
yeah, so with this idea of being able to travel on a budget, what are your favorite online resources for hacking the travel system?
Well, as I put in the video, some of my absolute favorite thing is matrix.ita.com. The reason is because it, unlike some of the other ones like Skyscanner or whatever, Matrix gives you the exact price, including taxes and fees and everything. So you know exactly what is the cheapest price that you can pay if you buy it. So then you have to try to beat that. Whereas if you went to something else like Expedia, they don't necessarily fill you in on all the details.
Okay. So do you have any tips or tricks for hacking through the taxes and fees when you buy flights with mileage points?
Okay, one of the best ones is check and see what airport has the cheapest fees for landing, because landing fees take up a great percentage of your price of your ticket. Believe it or not, landing fees can't be charged to miles. They have to be done in cash. So one example is if you fly into London Heathrow, which most people do coming from the United States, they're paying $300 and something in fees. If you fly into either Hamburg or Amsterdam Schiphol, you're only going to pay about $6 in fees.
Wow, that's a big difference.
So that's one way of limiting it. Another way is sometimes you can shift it around so that the fees are not as large, because there are ways of eliminating them, and I can't think of any right now off the top of my head other than that one.
Okay. So what kind of hacks are there for using airline miles for other things like cruises or for like hotels or anything like that?
Well, I always say that I used to say, don't use your miles for other things because you didn't get the value out of them. But SPG Group, which used to be the best one for airlines, recently got sold to Marriott Corp. And Marriott Corp devalued the miles for airlines. So now it's probably better to use the Marriott miles, the Marriott Bonvoy miles for hotels rather than for airlines, because that way you can save money in that respect.
So we've just got about a minute left. One last question. How do you think in the post-COVID world will affect mileage programs and their usage? Will there be more fire sales? Will there be other alternative usage? What do you think?
It's hard to say because no one really knows what's going to happen post-COVID. I suspect Marjorie thinks that they probably won't travel as much. I suspect it's going to change, that people will travel more because they're dying to get out of their house.
Mm.
And I think they're going to be less afraid of getting sick than they are right now.
Well, I think that airlines are going to have to be more flexible with changes and cancellations than they have in the past. Until this, I mean, they really have no choice until the situation stabilizes. And I don't really think it's going to stabilize anytime soon.
But do you think the mileage programs will stay? Will they get rid of them, or do you think they'll stay around?
The miles programs will definitely
They'll
stay around because it's the only thing keeping some of these airlines afloat. In fact, Avianca right now is running a 150% sale on
Okay.
miles just to get you to buy miles because that's an infusion of cash.
Well,
Right.
that's excellent to know. All right, we're at the top of the hour, so we really appreciate your taking the time today to share these tips and tricks with us. And on behalf of all the Hope 2020 attendees and presenters and volunteers, thank you again for presenting to us.
Thank
So we hope you have a great day, and we keep on hacking out there.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
So come back at the top of the hour for our next talk, securing a remote workforce in the face of COVID-19 and planning for the future. Over to you, 2020 Hope Ground Control.
And hello, hackers. My name's Fred. Some of you may know me, others might not. I've been doing artwork for the Hackers on Planet Earth conferences since the Fifth Hope was the first one. I worked on the last one too, the Circle of Hope. And I put together a little graphic for you this year for the 2020 conference. Now, you saw the graphic already, but what you didn't see is I've put a few Easter eggs. We're going to update the site with this new interactive version of the image. If you click on the buttons right here, you'll see that you can change the letters and the numbers.